Those temperatures are beginning to climb well above average.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30am.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show, that's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, it was the big Rishi Sunak speech at Manchester today where he decided to scrap the HS2 extension, to bring in a smoking ban, to make it illegal for anybody born after 2009 to smoke a cigarette, and he's going to change A-levels. But was it enough? Did it inspire? And were you at home satisfied? I'll be discussing all of that in detail with a great panel after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Good evening to you. Well, as you've been hearing, the Prime Minister has confirmed today that the northern leg of HS2 is being scrapped. Speaking after weeks of speculation, Rishi Sunak told the Conservative Party conference in Manchester that he's ready to make tough decisions for the country. He's defended the move as well, saying the money will be better spent developing projects in the North and the Midlands. HS2 will still run from Euston in central London, but current management will no longer be responsible, he said.
We'll reinvest every single penny, £36 billion, in hundreds of new transport projects in the North and the Midlands across the country. This means £36 billion of investment in the projects that will make a real difference across our nation.
Well, in reaction to that, the former Prime Minister David Cameron has criticised the announcement, saying that a once-in-a-generation opportunity has been lost. And the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, said the new investment plan simply doesn't create a coherent transport network. But Mayor of the West Midlands, Andy Street, while he's disappointed in the decision, said he believes it is a good compromise. Now, in his speech, the Prime Minister also reaffirmed his commitment to stop small boats crossing the English Channel from France.
Our new law will ensure that if you come here illegally, you will be detained and swiftly removed. Now, I am confident that once flights start going regularly to Rwanda, the boats will stop coming. Just look at how our returns agreement with Albania has seen the numbers coming from there fall by 90%. I am confident that our approach complies with our international obligations. But know this, I will do whatever is necessary to stop the boats.
Now, in news away from the Conservative Party conference in Manchester, a murder investigation has been launched after a dog, believed to be an XL bully, killed a man in Sunderland last night. Police responded just before 7 o'clock. Following reports, a dog had injured a 54-year-old. A 44-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. The dog was destroyed at the scene. A second dog was seized. And lastly, a sixth person has been arrested in connection with the Crooked House pub fire in Staffordshire. A 23-year-old man from Leicestershire was arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to commit arson with intent. He's been released on conditional bail while the investigation continues. 4 men and a woman were previously arrested in connection with the fire that destroyed the iconic pub back in August. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Yes, I'm back from Manchester, but it was Rishi Sunak's big day. Maybe the biggest opportunity he has between now and the next general election to set out his stall and to inspire people in this country to go out and vote Conservative next time round. Well, there was one very big moment, albeit it had been very heavily pre-trailed, and it was, of course, unsurprisingly, about HS2. Let's have a look at Rishi's big moment of the day.
I am ending this long-running saga. I am cancelling the rest of the HS2 project. And in its place, we will reinvest every single penny, £36 billion, in hundreds of new transport projects in the North and the Midlands across the country. This means £36 billion of investment in the projects that will make a real difference across our nation. No government has ever developed a more ambitious scheme for northern transport than our new Network North. This is the right way to drive growth and spread opportunity across our country, to level up. With our new Network North, you will be able to get from Manchester to the new station in Bradford in 30 minutes, Sheffield in 42 minutes, and to Hull in 84 minutes on a fully electrified line.
Well, I have to say, I've campaigned against HS2 ever since 2010. I've campaigned up and down that line, and indeed, for parties that I've led, won quite a few council seats on this very issue. I always thought it was madness to spend vast amounts of money just allowing people to get to London far more quickly. And I say that because that was the French experience. The TGV strengthened Paris, not Marseille or Lyon or elsewhere. And the idea that we'll spend all of this money on a huge number of projects connecting cities across the North and the Midlands, I say hooray for that. Although, only thing is, where's the guarantee that any of this will happen in the next 10 to 15 years? And where's the guarantee that actually the budgets will be any better managed than they were for HS2? What else was there in this speech? Well, the big nanny state. Yes, the Tories have gone so far away from being a libertarian party that now anybody born from 2009 or later will never be able to buy and smoke tobacco products. They'll probably go on taking Class A drugs in industrial quantities, but that somehow doesn't seem to really matter. I think it is over-nannying by the government, wholly unnecessary, and certainly not fitting with being a Conservative. And the third big pledge is a big change to A-levels, where rather than doing 3 subjects, you'll have to do 5 subjects, including maths and English. Oddly, before A-levels, we had the school certificate, which was almost exactly that. It's like we've gone back 70 years. Doesn't mean that it's wrong. But overall, I have to say, I think he's a nice bloke. I think he's got a very high intellect, much higher perhaps than many of our recent prime ministers, and a very decent, all-round, good, integrated immigrant family citizen. No question about any of that. But is he an inspiring leader or just a very good accountant? I have to say, I wasn't satisfied by what he had to say today. I was pleased about HS2. For the rest of it, I doubt this will inspire the country. That's my take. Give me your view, please. Were you satisfied? Farage@gbnews.com. Now, I'm joined by Alex Crowley, former political director to Boris Johnson, and John McTiernan, former advisor to Tony Blair. Alex, was this the big moment? Was it the big fight back for the Conservatives?
Well, a lot of people in the hall were hoping that it would be, and his strategy of presenting himself as Mr. Change after many, many years of the same is nice in theory. But the problem was his speech didn't really contain much of substance that was changing anything. The big change item we had was not building a railway line and replacing it with a couple of smaller railway lines and a few buses, which is fine.
This doesn't sound that you were very inspired.
No, well, look, you can overdo the inspirational bit, OK? I think, plenty of voters would much rather a Prime Minister that gets on and does stuff rather than kind of can make a great speech. Boris could make a fantastic speech, but no one accused him of being a particularly good manager of things, right? So you can overdo that. But I think there's a big strategic question here politically for the Conservative Party. They've obviously decided that the party can't present itself as change because, of course, they've been in 13 years and they were 14 by the time of the election. So instead, they've decided that Sunak himself is change because he's only been in a year. He wasn't even in Parliament when David Cameron was elected Prime Minister and so on. And that's fine. That makes sense from a political point of view. But therefore, you then got to go on and actually do things that are different, and you've got to actually change things. And the substance he was offering were perhaps worthy. The maths thing, very worthy. The smoking thing, whatever you think of the nanny state aspect of it, a worthy thing. Most people will agree. But I did struggle to detect what is a big change from Rishi Sunak that his rhetoric was promising.
However, John McTiernan, you see, Rishi Sunak, he's the agent of change because Keir Starmer, he told us, represents that failed establishment political status quo of the last 30 years. Rishi is for change.
Well, I thought I tweeted during the speech, I said, Rishi's given a brilliant clip to Labour Digital. He said, the country needs change. I was like, and Labour clipped it. It's been out already. And it's like don't give your opponents a great line. If the country needs change, there's an obvious way to do it. Remove these guys. That's the first thing I thought was problematic. The second thing was, it didn't feel visionary. It felt, here's a lot of things I can fix. Like making a big announcement on education, you go, and it will come into force in 2033.
Yeah.
Even if the Tories won every election until the 30s, Rishi won't be Prime Minister then. And I felt there's a kind of bathos to it. And I suppose in the end, the decision on HS2, there's now going to be a high-speed rail line between London and Birmingham, because it's been extended to Euston. There was a talk of it not coming to Euston.
And he made that clear today, under a new management company, because he was unhappy with the way it had been managed.
But what it actually means is it enlarges Greater London to include Birmingham. So now the Birmingham property market is going to be within 50 minutes, 55 minutes of central London.
Fair point.
Which actually means Birmingham is now part of London. And so it's actually, you're going to create a bigger London. Greater London's not just this greater south east.
John, I've always criticised
in terms of inequality, that's going to be quite
I've always
The
criticised
opposite of what they claim.
I've always criticised this. As I said, I cited the French example earlier. It just drives more business to London, not Birmingham or Manchester. I've never believed any of that. However, his plan to link up all those northern cities, and they all got to mention the new station in Bradford, Hull got to mention, the Manchester-Liverpool 12 billion investment. But Labour have come back and said that many of the new railway lines he's talking about and the electrifications had already been promised.
So what today was a bunch of re-announcements, some slight reinstatements, because remember when they took the Leeds leg off HS2, they also cancelled Bradford, the station. They cancelled quite a lot of what was then called Northern Powerhouse Rail.
Yes.
So there's a new brand for re-announcing existing promises which haven't actually been through more than, here's the costing estimate. They've not got what would the work take, they've not built in the inflation, they don't know that the 12 billion for Manchester to Liverpool will actually be able to fund that. If it has the same cost overruns, because they've said actually, haven't they, costs have increased on HS2.
This is my worry, yeah. Will all these new projects finish up the same?
And I saw an estimate from the FT correspondent, Jen Williams, that a large chunk, she said up to a third, of the money is going to be spent on potholes. Now, potholes are important, but there's potholes in roads because of 13 years of underfunding of local council. To switch money from rail to that, it feels like there's a lot of spin in the representation, and I suspect it will fall apart over time.
The idea of linking up the northern cities is a very good idea.
Very good idea.
Fine. OK, so we agree on that.
Yeah.
So the Labour response to it has been, well, they've been critical, but what would Labour do about HS2?
So the first thing is, Labour wouldn't have built such a gold-plated railway. 10 billion of the costs are actually probably thanks to your campaigning. The campaigning in the Chilterns
thank you.
led to...
Well, it's now the largest underground railway in the world.
Yeah. And the irony is, of course, this was done to placate Tory voters who are probably going to vote Lib Dem in the next election. So that £10 billion to not even save the seats you want to save is remarkably bad political spending. But I think Labour's position is we now have a massive problem with infrastructure, whether it's rail infrastructure, delivering the northern connections, or the new power connections, or the offshore cables and interconnectors. Such a massive need for them. Something's going wrong in infrastructure development planning, something's going wrong in slowing down the planning permissions, something's going wrong in the design and delivery. So there's going to be Labour will have a review. We can't do anything about it in opposition. We have to be ready coming to government to do
I think it's pretty tough for everybody. What about the advanced British standard, which is, as I said, the sort of updated school cert? The idea that we do five subjects up to 18, so we get a broader qualification, a bit more like a sort of baccalaureate type qualification. Good idea?
Well, I mean, you know me, I'm a Remainer. Closer to Europe we can get.
Oh, they never give up.
We're taking European qualifications.
They never
get European timescale for getting rid of fossil fuel cars. I mean, that's something funny about it. I thought it was very funny. The Prime Minister's great reform is, let's be more like France.
Well, the French did get some things right.
Myself.
He was also going to give incentives for teachers, wasn't he?
Yes, he was, and of course that's
not a bad idea because we do need good people in teaching.
Exactly, and that was the criticism of some of his earlier announcements about school reform, as the teachers were saying, well, you're asking us to do extra work, but you're not paying us any more, and so that was obviously a very good thing. But it's just, I mean, I'll come back to it. I don't get any sense that the voters of Britain were saying, oh, if only we just had more maths. Everything, do you know what I mean?
Everything better with more maths.
Yeah, I mean, obviously...
I tell you what, just go and play darts. Your mental arithmetic would improve pretty quickly there.
Or snooker, very good for mental arithmetic. So, OK, fine, it's all very kind of worthy stuff.
Worthy, yeah.
But, and he did set a challenge to the Labour Party, which would be interesting to see how they respond next week, because the criticism that Keir Starmer is kind of basically trying to avoid saying anything while he's busy measuring the curtains for Downing Street, is a fair one, and it's something that resonates with voters, because voters say they definitely don't like the Tories, fair enough, but they also say, we don't quite know what to make of this Keir Starmer bloke yet, we don't really know what he stands for, we're not really sure what Labour would do in office. So Labour have a choice next week. They can continue their strategy of basically not saying anything, apart from sort of general platitudes about spending more, which is fine. Or they can kind of outline what they would actually do, not in any great detail, because you wouldn't as an opposition at this point, but to give people So if Labour are the change, then I would like to know what's a Labour change.
He's made it easy for Labour on one thing. He didn't mention legal net migration at all.
No.
We're going to get the figures in a couple of weeks showing over 1 million in the last 2 years. And as for stop the boats, I mean, no mention of ECHR. This could have been a real wedge issue with Labour.
I think a few things. One is, I think it's interesting that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and of Great Britain and Northern Ireland believes his major speech should be about posing a problem to the Labour Party. He talked about Keir and the Labour Party so often you thought, don't you care about Britain? Do you not have a view about Britain's future? So that was interesting to me. But I don't think he listened to what you said during the referendum campaign. He didn't listen to the campaign at all. Take back control. It wasn't stop the boats. Nobody can ever stop 100% of something. What you have to do is have control. And I think the chances of Labour meeting, I mean, that's why Keir went to Europe, speak to Macron, speak to Europol. Somebody who actually can do a deal with Europe is somebody who actually can take control.
And it could be even higher numbers.
And the contest over control is one that Labour can at least take to a score draw, because I think Rishi made a mistake by saying he could stop it. You can never stop.
Well, Tony Abbott in Australia did. Final thought.
He had an ocean, didn't he? He had an ocean.
Well, he did, and we've got a channel, you know. And final thought, Alex. I was in Manchester. There were swarms of young people there. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
The sheer number of young people that were there, hungry for ideas, wanting to believe in something.
Yeah.
Did today do it?
For those people, I'm not sure they found what they're looking for quite yet.
OK, gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Somehow, he did his best. It hasn't really worked. In a moment, I'll be joined by Shrewsbury and Atcham MP, Daniel Kaczynski, an HS2 supporter. I'll find out in a moment what his reaction is.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, some of your reactions from home. Elliot on Twitter says, no speech is going to do anything to convince me of anything these days. Heard far too many promises with no follow-through. I'll judge actions and their results if they ever happen. Dave on Twitter is so sceptical. I'm not satisfied with any politician's speech because that's all they ever are. I'll be satisfied with actions. Pat, on the other hand, says, I liked Rishi and his speech. I like the spread of money across the country on the cancelling of HS2. I like the A&T levels being combined. As a lifelong floating voter, I would vote for Rishi. Now, I'm joined in the studio by Daniel Kaczynski, Conservative Member of Parliament for Shrewsbury and Atcham. And, Daniel, first things first, I said there were loads of young people up at the conference. A lot of MPs weren't there. You weren't there.
No, but I was working in the House of Commons because I'm one of the Prime Minister's trade envoys, and I was looking after a delegation this week from overseas. But
a lot of MPs weren't there. It somehow suggests, and maybe this speech has changed it, I don't know, but it somehow suggests that Rishi is not inspiring the parliamentary party.
Oh, I don't think that's right. I think he's bringing discipline back into the parliamentary party. The one thing that we Tory MPs crave for more than anything else is the strong hand of discipline. And
Good Lord, what a quote.
And we were floundering all over the place, unfortunately, over the last period under Liz Truss and the dying days of Boris Johnson. The whole thing was not what we wanted. He is starting to introduce a certain degree of discipline into the parliamentary party. And you can't win an election without discipline.
All right. I just noticed there were many faces I expected to see that weren't there. HS2, you've been a strong supporter of the HS2 project. How do you feel today?
Well, I supported HS2 because Patrick McLaughlin, the Secretary of State for Transport, talked about capacity on the network. We had campaigned for a long time for a direct train service between Shrewsbury and London. We couldn't get it because there was no capacity on the network. So I supported HS2. But I actually appreciate the leadership that Rishi has shown.
He says the facts have changed. He says since the 2010 original conception of the plan that the facts have changed, that a lot more of us work from home, etc. Is he right?
Well, there's something else fundamentally important, which is the equilibrium, the pendulum has swung away from engineers and government towards individuals and communities. And having got the scars on my back on trying to complete a circular road around Shrewsbury, I have seen at first hand the power of the Environment Agency, the power of individuals to prevent infrastructure projects from being brought to fruition. And actually, as a result of HS2 not going ahead, we've been given more money for our project in Shrewsbury, which is very welcome. But, Nigel, this is an important thing. Very easy to blame the government, but what the media should be doing now is a forensic examination of why the costs have gone up so much. And if you empower people to the degree that we have empowered them to block and frustrate and prevent essential infrastructure projects from being built, then ultimately we all pay the price.
That actually extends to house building as well. Stay with me. Now, joining me down the line is Christian Woolmar, railway journalist, historian and former Labour politician. Christian, in some ways, you might be upset that this ambitious new extension to Manchester is not going to be built, and yet a lot more railway infrastructure being built right across the Midlands and the north of England. So, in some ways, isn't this good news for the railways?
Yes. Well, let's come to that in a minute. I've never been a fan, like you, Nigel, I've never been a fan of HS2. But there is a problem here. I don't know if you've been to the Chilterns lately, but there's £28 billion has been spent on this, and another 20 billion will be needed to spend just to get to Birmingham, and we'll end up with what I've called the Acton to Aston shuttle, because the Euston bit, yes, that's been taken out of HS2's hands. But, it's going to be years and years and years before that's actually completed, and it is, as your picture is showing now, an absolute wasteland. I cycle through it a lot and it's a disgrace. So, I think we do have to finish the project between Euston and Birmingham. And then it's not an amazingly useful line. By cutting that last bit off, we've actually reduced the function of it. So, in a way, I do recognise that Rishi Sunak and his ministers were between a rock and a hard place. Do you end up spending a lot of money chasing some bad, or do you actually scrap the thing?
Yeah.
They've decided to scrap the thing. Now, on the good news, Nigel, I think you mustn't be fooled by that. And you actually said in your introduction earlier that you were a bit sceptical about it. And they've cobbled this lot of projects together without consulting with Network Rail. And I mean, that Network Rail own all the infrastructure. They know all about the projects, and they haven't even talked to them. So they've cobbled this up in a hotel room in Manchester or in some offices in Whitehall without kind of asking, is this one feasible? How much would this cost? The new station in Bradford, well, that was scrapped a few years ago, and nobody, and I've talked to, knows where this new station will go. What does it mean? Now, there's some good projects in there. There's electrification of the North Wales line, which hasn't been put forward before. Great idea. But, in general, it just seems a bunch of projects cobbled together to kind of sugar the pill.
All right, Christian, that's a pretty sceptical response. Daniel Kaczynski, on that, a lot of these are re-promises. We were going to have a Bradford station years ago, then it was scrapped, now it's coming back. There isn't much new here, really, is there?
Well, there's more money for my constituency.
Oh, that's all that matters.
Which is very important. But Nigel, when you are £2.8 trillion in debt, and you will know that we had to borrow $700 billion to get through the pandemic. When you're spending $98 billion a year on debt interest payments, and by the way, the Speaker of the Congress was got rid of because of concerns about their $33 trillion debt. I think it's very welcome news that despite the fact that HS2 has been scrapped, this money will be earmarked for those additional projects, new projects in certain cases, because the budget is very tight at the moment, as you know. And you are a fiscal hawk like I am.
Daniel, if all those... Listen, the scrapping of this HS2 extension, and if the other projects, the tram system in Leeds, and if all of these things were done, it'd be fantastic. If. Final thought. Did your leader do enough today, do you think, to turn things around?
Well, I believe so, and I sincerely hope so. I think we have 12 months potentially to convince the British people to give us an unprecedented fifth term of office. I'm not convinced by what Sir Keir Starmer is saying, and actually, to be honest with you, those hardcore left Labour MPs are still there. They haven't gone away, and I just feel that the country can't afford a Labour government.
Well, we'll have a good look at Keir Starmer next week. Daniel, thank you for joining me in the studio. In a moment, we'll talk about the smoking ban. Yeah, it's unbelievable. Anybody born after 2009, for them, it'll be a criminal offence to smoke. Does that actually work, or just play into the hands of the black market?
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News. Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It doesn't really matter whether it's Labour or Tory. They simply can't resist it. The size of government gets bigger and bigger. They want to control every aspect of your life, and Rishi Sunak is no exception to that. Anybody born after 2009 will not be able to go into a shop and legally buy tobacco. So you're going to have this weird situation in 10 years' time where somebody goes in and wants to buy a packet of fags, and they're 26 years old, but they can't buy them at 26, but they can if they're 27. The whole thing is bonkers. I should think the criminal gangs must be absolutely licking their lips at the prospect of this. But of course, it's all done in the name of health. And after all, government always knows what's best. Or does it? I'm joined by Darren Haley, co-founder of the vaping company eBurn. Now, Darren, what do you make of this legislation that's going to be on? It's going to be a free vote, he said in the House of Commons, but I have little doubt that MPs will vote for it.
There'll be people that are for and against. My personal opinion and that of the other co-directors of the company for eBurn is that we do think it would be a move in the right direction for banning tobacco, but it has to be in a supportive way. And recently, there has been an announcement for the government swap to stop a £45 million fund, which is going to allow for councils to bid for that funding and get over 1 million people to switch to quit with vaping.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're a vaping company and vaping is seen as a way out of tobacco smoking. The other debate, of course, is whether it's becoming trendy amongst teenagers. Because he did say about vaping, they're going to start regulating your products in terms of bubblegum flavour and all the rest of it.
And I fully agree with that. It should be not attractive for younger generations, and you know, I'm all for, like with our packaging, it's with the Switch to Quit range, it's just words. There's no pictures. There's nothing to attract children. Our products go into the mental health. So
yeah, I saw that. I saw that. But here's the Prime Minister attacking, well, frankly, actually making tobacco illegal for anybody born after 2009. And yet we have a drugs epidemic in this country. Wouldn't it be better to have focused on that?
Drugs, yes, they... but look at the... I'm not sure of the actual figures, but when you look at how many people die per year for tobacco-related illnesses to those that are using drugs, I'm sure that the tobacco aspect would be higher.
Well, we could argue that sugar is now the greatest poison of all. We have an obesity crisis, so why not ban sugar? I mean, all I'm saying is, to me, these things should be personal choices, not for government to intervene. And I reckon if there's a black market in drugs, there'd be a black market in tobacco for anybody born after 2009.
That is a real possibility, but if it's correctly policed, and the vaping phenomenon is consumer-driven, not industry-driven. We're just simply responding to what consumers want.
How big a ban on vaping is he going to bring in? How many restrictions is he going to bring in, do you believe?
My main product is actually a disposable, but...
Which they're targeting. And Australia have banned.
but my product isn't aimed at children, it's aimed at mental health. And 80% of those people that are in mental health facilities do smoke, and when they go in, they need an alternative, and vaping is an acceptable form of nicotine intake.
Yeah, I wonder, Darren, whether in the end vaping might get banned as well, given the puritanical drift that our governments are on.
Well, I can't
No, I mean, I don't know. But generally, I understand why the vaping industry might be in support of this ban, but is it really for government to make these decisions?
I lost my mum to cancer, so I've got a personal interest in any life that's saved through not smoking tobacco is a positive thing.
We could end up banning everything, couldn't we? Alcohol, we could argue, was wrecking lives all over the country, killing people. I don't know. Thank you for joining me on this debate. And I know I'll be in a minority with my view on this, because anything to do with health, safety, protection, people say, yes, the government must do more. But generally, governments, when they intervene, don't generally get things right and create black markets. Now, quite extraordinary, my What the Farage moment, is I really thought in the run-up to this conference that there really would be some serious talk about a four-letter word. Yes, I expected to hear a four-letter word coming out from the Home Secretary yesterday and the PM today, and that was ECHR. But no, we got nothing at all from the Home Secretary yesterday, Suella Braverman, and today the Prime Minister just said that we'll be able to send people to Rwanda whilst meeting our international obligations. We won't. We won't. There is little chance of the government winning that legal action they're fighting. Despite the 140 million quid we've spent, not a single person yet has been sent to Rwanda. This was their big opportunity to drive a wedge between their position and that of the Labour Party. They've chosen not to do it. They will not stop the boats. None of it will happen. And not even a single word, by the way, not a word on net legal migration. And the figures are coming out in a couple of weeks. It will be over 1 million for the last 2 years, with a massive impact on GP appointments, traffic, housing, and education, and everything else. That, I think, is the big fail from this particular conference. Now, Kevin McCarthy, the US Speaker, was booted out last night. It had never, ever happened before in the history of America. Let's find out why. John Fund is a columnist for the National Review magazine and a US political commentator, and I'm speaking to him direct in Washington, D.C. John, it's quite difficult over here to sort of make people understand the sheer significance of what's happened here. This was a big historic move, wasn't it?
Yes, we elect speakers for 2 years, and this is the first time in anyone's memory that we have had a speaker removed. And more astonishingly, 96% of his party members voted for him, but 100% of the Democratic opposition voted against him. There were 8 renegade Republicans, and that was enough to end the speakership of Kevin McCarthy, even though he had just won a significant victory by keeping.
Oh dear, we have lost the line, which is not good. So Kevin McCarthy has gone. This was a row, a serious row. It was over all sorts of budget deals, including funding for Ukraine. And some of those Republicans simply thought that McCarthy was being too pally with the Democrats. But he would argue, McCarthy would argue in his defense, that he managed to get a deal that stopped a government shutdown. Now, John is going to rejoin me down the line, I hope. John, wasn't McCarthy's achievement that he managed to stop the government shutting down? Why is it that Matt Gaetz and the renegades seem to want the government shut down?
Well, I think that in reality, they all had personal reasons to vote against McCarthy, and their dissatisfaction with the terms by which he kept the government open were a smokescreen. I think Matt Gaetz is running for governor of Florida. He also faces the House ethics probe. So I think this was a way for him to, I think, deflect attention from whatever the results of the House ethics probe were. If it comes out against him, he can say he's a martyr and being punished for having challenged the establishment. And of course, he's not planning to stay in the House for very long. He has bigger political ambitions.
Yeah, and because Brits won't realise this, but after the president and the vice president in America, the speaker is number 3 in line. Now, it seems to me that what the Republicans have done here is an own goal to a certain extent. It just doesn't have a good look to the outside world. Some talk that Donald Trump could replace McCarthy. Surely that's not true.
It's an amusing thought. It's an intriguing thought, but it's a completely unrealistic thought. The House has never elected a non-member as a speaker, and I think Donald Trump's style would not be suited to Robert's Rules of Order or the parliamentary or congressional process.
I think that's one of the biggest understatements of the year. Finally, John, how will this get sorted out, and will it all finish with the US government shutting down in 40-odd days' time?
Well, I think we have 2 candidates for Speaker now. The Majority Leader, who was McCarthy's deputy, Steve Scalise, and the head of the Judiciary or Legal Committee, Jim Jordan. Both are very competent people. One of them will win next week, and I think that there will be a honeymoon period. And part of the honeymoon period will be that the Republican members, including some of the rebels, will not want to go through this again because of the chaos and the bad public look that it has. So I think in about 40 days, we have to have another go at keeping the government open.
Yeah.
Hope it's more orderly, and I think it will be more orderly.
John Funn, thank you for joining me down the line from Washington, D.C. Thank you. Now, not only have the banks been closing our accounts over the last few years, but over the last few decades, they have been ripping us off for tens of billions. Yes, the PPE scandal and crisis. It hasn't gone away. There's another huge wave of it. And frankly, the way many of these banks have behaved is little short of disgusting. There is now the possibility of compensation for millions more people. Find out how and why in just a moment.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK. Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panelists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, as you all know very well, I am not exactly a fan of the banks closing down people's accounts, making life miserable for small business, crushing out cash and closing down 3/5 of their branches in the last 8 years. But there's another story, and it's an old story, but actually it's an even bigger scandal. It is the PPI mis-selling story. Yes, you've heard of it before, but I wonder whether you really understood what the implications of it were, and indeed are, because it's not gone away. Well, I'm joined by Damon Parker, senior partner of law firm Harkus Parker. And you are the law firm leading a new legal case. From the top, Damon, and thank you for joining us here in the studio. What was PPI?
PPI was theoretically a kind of insurance that would protect you from not being able to repay your loans. But the problem with it was, first of all, it was bad insurance. It frequently didn't cover what it was supposed to cover. If you were self-employed, for example, it didn't cover you, obviously, and often people were covered for that risk anyway. But the big issue, the one that hasn't, I think, been adequately publicised, is the fact that for every pound you paid in PPI premium, between 75% and 90%, 95% sometimes, was a commission paid to the bank.
So an absolute mega rip-off.
Astonishing.
And this was never declared.
It was never declared. It's a secret commission. And so,
a secret commission?
And so...
But that must be illegal, surely?
It's been found by the Supreme Court in PPI cases to be against the provisions of the Consumer Credit Act. It's unfair.
So how were the banks selling this? How were that? I mean, millions signed up for this. Because the idea that you pay a small amount of money, and then if you lose your job or you fall ill, there'll be enough money there to cover your mortgage. And I mean, you know, I can see the appeal of it. How were they selling it? On the phone, or how was it sold?
Well, it depends very much on the kind of loan that you had. If you were taking out a mortgage or an unsecured loan, you might be sold it. But often if you had a credit card, you just had it, you were given it. So it wasn't sold to you as such, it was just there in
just tacked on?
It was just there in the small print. And so frequently people don't know, and this is the essence of these secret commission claims, you don't know that you paid a secret commission, but often you don't even know that you had PPI. It might have been in the statement, but you had to be looking carefully to see it. And so that's the scandal. So the greater part of this is...
What was the timeline on this, Damon?
Well, PPI started to be sold in probably the 80s. 64 million policies were sold overall. And although we think probably about £50 billion has been returned to customers, including the expenses of the banks, 18 billion, the FT says, it still is in the banking system to be returned to customers.
And so when did it stop operating?
But it hasn't necessarily stopped.
Still there in a way.
It's there now. I've seen offer letters settling apparently PPI claims where it's sort of said in the small print, and by the way, we assume because you need it, you want PPI to continue. You've got to be looking carefully to spot it and say no.
I'm just thinking, Mr. and Mrs. Smith are sitting right now in Kettering on their sofa watching this. They don't know whether they had PPI, do they?
Probably not, but if they had a credit card, they probably did.
Right.
And they can check. We can check for them.
Yes.
And if I can plug this, ppiglo.com, sign up, we'll check for you. And 350,000 people or so have already asked us to check.
Yeah.
And we have 50,000 clients ready to go on these cases.
And what could Mr. and Mrs. Smith be entitled to?
It depends very much on how they use their credit card, what kind of PPI it was. But if you do an averaging out of £18 billion and 6 million people, we think about £3,000 per person. But it depends very much on when it was as well, because interest plays a significant...
It's big money. So in general, I'm taking out a mortgage and I take out this insurance cover, and typically what would it cost me? Say I'm taking out a £100,000 mortgage. Typically, what would the PPI cover have cost me?
It might just be a few pounds a month, or a few tens of pounds a month. And if it's credit cards, it's less. But don't forget that it's useless insurance. You should never have it. And anyway, you could have got it for less money somewhere else, presumably, because someone else wouldn't be charging you 90% commission.
And these legal battles have gone on for years and years. You mentioned already that this went as far as the Supreme Court. And yet, we don't hear much about this anymore, do we?
No, we don't, because one of the stories is that PPI stopped. It didn't stop, but it was supposed to stop in 2019. Remember those Arnold Schwarzenegger adverts? There was a kind of Arnold Schwarzenegger robot, and that was to encourage people to come forward to claim through the FCA scheme. But that was a peculiar scheme because it didn't really give people back everything that they'd lost or been charged. The FCA proposed that there was a tipping point between fairness and unfairness. The tipping point was 50%, so if you paid 80% commission, you got 30% back.
And this was banks, building societies...
Credit card companies, store card operators. Anyone who's giving people loans, consumer loans, was pretty well charging PPI. Because it was such a bean feast. It was good for the people who sold it, it was good for the banks, and they made a lot of money. And even now, it's been terribly profitable for them.
I just find this whole... the sheer amounts of money. But just repeat, how much money has been returned to individuals?
We think about £50 billion.
£50 billion has gone back to British consumers who were ripped off with a hidden commission on PPI. That is a vast amount of money.
It's a huge amount of money. But despite that, I want to stress, it's still been a very, very profitable product for the banks because they've still got 18 billion of it. And they know who their customers were. They could write to everyone and say that you have PPI, do you want to claim it back?
But they're not going to do it without a massive action. So how do you operate in this? So people get in touch with the PPI site that you've set up. You run a quick check. You tell them yes or no. And how do you operate? Is this a big class action that you take legally?
Yeah, it's a group action. So we're going to try to run the cases all together. It hasn't been done before in this type of...
Very American style of doing things.
But it has to be more efficient, more coherent, more cost-effective. Because at the moment, a small number, or I say a small number, tens of thousands of cases are in the county courts being pursued individually. They're difficult to run, they're expensive to run, and the banks can crush them.
Yeah. So strength in numbers.
Strength in numbers.
Now, I have to get a response from the industry to everything that's just been said. Because a spokesman for UK Finance, the body that represents the banks and building societies, has said the FCA's deadline for customers to make a complaint to a firm which sold them PPI was in August 2019. Firms will review and respond to any claims made in legal proceedings as required. Now, I've got to tell you, Damon, I'm not a big fan of the FCA, but they're saying, no, it's all too late.
But it's not too late, because what the FCA couldn't do was extinguish your legal rights. It was the end of their scheme, and they had set up a scheme that made it easy for people to claim without resorting to litigation. Now it's necessary for people to go to the courts. And we say this is the only effective way of vindicating your rights.
Damon Parker, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Fascinating. Very, very interesting indeed. Well, we're all back from Manchester. Luckily, those of us who didn't have to come back by train have managed to make it back from... I got back in the early hours of this morning. Jacob, I was just saying, on the positives about Manchester, an astonishing number of young people.
Oh, amazing. I addressed a Young Conservatives drinks reception yesterday evening, and it was absolutely packed. You couldn't go from one end of the room to the other. And they're really interested in policy and excited by being Conservatives. And they're brave, because being at university today and being a Conservative
very tough.
Doesn't make you that many friends.
No, very, very tough. And, of course, HS2, are you pleased?
Oh, delighted. I always thought it was a terrible idea. And they're going to spend some money on the roads, which I'm all in favour of.
Yeah, no, listen,
I
campaigned for years against HS2, right from the very beginning. Now, I'm going to be joining you.
You're joining me? Well, yes. You were the most talked about man at the party conference. It was absolutely amazing. Somebody who isn't even a Tory. Well, you may be a Tory, but not a member of the Conservative Party.
It was a mini hijack. I'll be joining Jacob after the weather.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. A little bit of a mixed picture as we end off the day. We've got rain lingering across parts of Northern Ireland, southern Scotland. Will just sink its way southwards into parts of Northern England as well before generally petering off into the second half of the night. Though some other areas of rain just beginning to push their way into parts of Northern Ireland throughout the early hours as well. A good amount of cloud around will hold up the temperatures for most places around 11-13 degrees Celsius, but parts of Northern Scotland will drop off a touch more down into those single figure values under the clearer skies we have here. This rain will then spread its way in as we head throughout Thursday. Quite a damp start to the day for Northern Ireland, then into Western Scotland, Western England and Wales also seeing a fair amount of rain throughout the day. Far southeastern areas of England, though, staying largely dry with some sunny spells here, so a relatively fine day across the board. Will be quite breezy for most of us, taking the edge off some of those temperatures a touch, but 19 degrees Celsius possible in the south, generally more around the 16 to 17 degrees Celsius further north. Into Friday, this mixture of low pressure and high pressure continues. Generally high pressure stuck towards the south, helping to keep things relatively fine and dry, but this trailing frontal system across northern areas will continue to bring outbreaks of rain at times, could turn quite persistent really into areas of Scotland, particularly once this next pulse moves in later on in the day. But further towards the south, again, a good amount of sunshine as we head into the afternoon and into the weekend as well. Those temperatures are beginning to climb well above average for the time of year, reaching the mid-20s. Bye-bye.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know